I'm Heather Pemberton-Levy. We are live from Gartner IT Symposium Expo in Orlando, Florida. I'm here with Don Scheibenreif and Mbula Schoen, who just finished giving the opening keynote session with their colleagues Tina Nuno and Val Schreiber. Don is with our Customer Experience Research Group. He's a Vice President and Distinguished Analyst. And Mbula is with our Program and Portfolio Management Group. And you're from Germany, correct?
That's
she came
correct.
all the way from Munich. And Don flew in from Seattle.
Originally from Chicago, but I live in Seattle.
Okay, so they are going to talk to us about the big concept that was released in our opening keynote. And every year the CIOs and IT leaders look forward to a big, bold theme that we present that helps them think strategically about the coming year. So tell us about winning in the turns and leadership in a digital society.
Thanks, Heather. The idea for the keynote started that October 29th, 2019 is the 50th anniversary of the first message sent over the ARPANET, which is the precursor to today's internet. And that got us going on what are some of the challenges our client organizations are faced with moving forward. And right now we're seeing a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace from politics and economics and even the work of the digital giants. And we wanted to provide our clients with some tools and thinking to help them deal with uncertainty, which we call winning in the turns. It's basically a way to think about how do you respond to turns you can see, but also how do you get ready for turns that you can't see. And that's kind of the essence of scenario planning. So we will spend the keynote talking about different ways organizations can respond to turns. The other big idea we are introducing is this idea of TechQuilibrium, which is technology equilibrium. And it's really that perfect mix of being a traditional company and a technology company or digital company. And we explore why this is important, and we give examples about other organizations that are doing that. And we think for organizations to actually be successful, to win in the turns, they have to find that point of balance between being a traditional company and being a digital company.
Right, we're going to get into that a little bit more in a little bit, and we will be taking your questions for Don and Mbula later in the program, so post them in the comment section. We'll get to them in a little bit. So Mbula, you work with program and portfolio management.
That's correct.
And leaders who are within that group who've been dealing with these turns and challenges all the time. Well, what does it mean particularly for them?
Absolutely, and you know, the whole thing gets just a different accent when it comes to speed and agility. So if you think about project, program, and portfolio management and how we have honed all these practices and processes over the last 15 years, the fact is they are not enough to support digital business going forward. And so Gartner has been talking a lot about this shift, you know, moving from projects to products, because fact is, in digital business, sometimes you really don't know what the end product will look like. So you have to start somewhere and keep iterating as you go along. And the impact on that is also in operating models. It impacts the financial models. It impacts the skills that you have within your PPM base as well. But the truth of the fact is, you know, you will always still have some projects that will have to be done in a waterfall kind of way, and you will have those that will be needed to be done in a product kind of approach. So the big question here for portfolio managers is, how do they balance those two ends, right? So that's where winning in the terms comes in, and the end approach that we're taking here. They have to strike that balance between the different approaches that are available to enable digital business.
Right. So let's get back to this concept of TechQuilibrium. It's a new term, and why don't you describe that balance that we're counseling leaders to achieve between traditional and digital business, and where they can fall on that spectrum, because it could vary by industry, correct?
Sure. So we actually have research that shows by industry how, we look at it in two ways. One is how digital are your operations, and how digital is your value proposition, kind of what you bring to market. And we found that the best companies actually have upwards of 50% of their operations are digital and 30% of their value proposition are digital. But most of our clients are in the lower areas of that. So we are encouraging them, every organization is going to have a different balance point. I mean, not everybody has to be digital. A oil pipeline is never going to be completely digital, but if you're a bank or if you're a retailer or other manufacturer, more and more of your operations do have to be digital. So we are encouraging our clients to find their balance point.
Yep.
The other thing that we talk about is that the digital giants are also trying to become more traditional. So organizations like Amazon buying retailers and Apple getting into financial services. So as traditional organizations are trying to become more digital, digital giants are trying to become more traditional.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, that's when things really start to get interesting.
Right, absolutely. And if you remember in the keynote today, when we talked about that concept, the issue of organizational culture also comes in. And we highlighted that in the keynote today, that that's one of the things that are going to determine whether you can accelerate and really win in the turns, or is your organizational culture going to hold you back? And so even as we talk about all the different things that we can do, new technologies, new processes, we have to be cognizant of the organizational culture that we have existing and what we need to do to make that stronger and more capable and more fluid and adaptable to the new things that we need to do.
Right.
Absolutely.
And you also talked about this concept of risk and value and trade-offs between growth and innovation and security, right? We'll get into that in a few minutes. Talk to us about and opportunities and dilemmas and how organizations start to think about opportunity versus just the dilemma, because there are a lot of pressures. And especially in uncertain times, sometimes those pressures can become overwhelming.
One of the things that we thought about as we were mapping out this keynote is, in the past, people had choices. I could either I could offer privacy, but really I couldn't be that personal in the way I interact with customers. Or if I cut my budget, I really couldn't grow and invest. And what we're saying is, with this pervasive technology, connected people, that now those or opportunities, or what we call and dilemmas, actually become opportunities, that you have to cut and grow at the same time. You have to protect privacy and offer a personalized experience. You have to have what Mbula talked about is a business value proposition and a societal value proposition. In the past, those were choices. Now we're saying organizations don't have a choice anymore. They have to do both.
Absolutely.
And what's the role for the CIO in this? Because they have an opportunity, and this was really emphasized in the keynote, to lead. And Tina Nuno emphasized this in her leadership section about leading with the board and really taking that pivotal role.
And when you remember what Tina talked about, it's really all about leadership. The CIOs are being called upon to move in the forefront, not so much about technology implementations and design, but this is their opportunity as well to actually come out as leadership and lead technology implementations towards supporting that approach of supporting, the end dilemmas as well. And what is leadership all about? It's about some of those aspects that we talked about. Look across your organization. Do we have the skills? Do we have the people? What kind of retraining do we need to invest in? Coaching and mentoring. All those soft aspects of leadership, that is the call to action for CIOs when it comes to leading in the turns.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think also we asked, are you tired of just being seen as a service provider? And the audience said pretty much yes.
Well, there were a few groans.
There were a few groans.
A mix of applause and laughter and definitely.
But what Tina talked about, which is interesting, is that CIOs have to go on the offense and defense at the same time, which means they have to tailor their communication and their interactions with their executive peers focused on revenue, cost, and risk. And that's what she said, that's all you need to focus on. So I think hopefully what we did is we provided CIOs with a boost, that they can be more than just a service provider, they can be a strategic partner for their organizations.
That trusted ally role.
The trusted ally.
Not everyone's there yet, but there's the opportunity. So Don, I want to shift a little bit to talking about achieving TechQuilibrium with your customers.
Right.
And a concept you raised called the everything customer, which
I like that.
Look, we live in this world where we all are that person. You kind of challenge the audience. Who here is an everything customer? I am, right? So tell us about that concept.
So we, like the and dilemma, we were thinking about how customers today want it, they want it both ways. They want to be treated personally, but they want to be treated like everybody else. They want to be connected and they want to be left alone. And we looked at those kind of seemingly opposite things, and what was it telling us? We just said, look, customers want everything, and technology is actually making that possible. That I can have both a personalized experience and I can be left alone. So we explored that, and we talked about how customers actually don't want to be limited just to your website or your mobile application. They want you to meet them wherever they are, whether it's in front of the refrigerator, in the car, at the gym, at the office. And we talked about this idea of a multi-experience platform, which is a technology way to help clients do that.
Yeah, and there are different ways to do it though, right, across that multi-experience platform when you think about it. Can you talk about some of the different techniques or examples that you gave?
Yeah, so there's two aspects to it. One is design, and we were very clear that this is not just a technology solution. Making more technology is not the answer available to customers, but that you need designers, digital designers, who are going to design the right experiences. So we cited a couple of examples. We talked about how United Airlines gives its passengers 10 different ways to interact with them, including a smart speaker. And kind of the highlight is when we said that Domino's Pizza actually offers customers 15 different ways to order a pizza digitally, which
important, right?
Really, really important priorities. Even banks are getting into the game. So. But what's interesting is that it's not just 15 of the same application in different forms, it's fit for purpose applications. Like the watch is different than the smart speaker, different than your car. So that the whole idea of creating those seamless experiences that are consistent across touch points, that's the opportunity that we identified.
And I want to stay on this customer experience for a minute, because I think some of the new demographics and rising demographics are really fascinating. I have a Gen Z at home.
You do, right?
And they really, one of the statistics that you talked about was that they are so interested in identity and self-expression, and they are. They're such a creative generation, and how brands market that to that is really unique. Share some of what you discussed.
Yeah, we Gartner actually measures. We ask people around the world to rank a series of 90 different values. One of them is identity, which is how the products and services I use reflect who I am as a person. When we look across all the generations from baby boomers all the way up to Generation Z, identity was in the top 10. For the others, it was in the 30s. So what that means is that if you are making a product or a service, you really have to be mindful of how the Gen Z connects that to their identity. And we talked about something as simple as Band-Aids now, or bandages, can actually match your skin tone. We actually,
interesting.
When we were in South Africa, Plasta was a company that we learned about, where they actually were the first to introduce different color skin tones for they call them plastas or Band-Aids, but that told us that there's something here, that people want that to be treated individually. But then how do you do that at scale?
And then when you think about it, we're talking about 100 million people, customers in North America alone, not even globally. So you still have Europe, Asia. So it's a huge customer base that organizations have to think about how they're going to tap into this potential. Like I said, in North America it's just 100 million. Think about Europe and so on.
I think most people are just catching their breath about serving millennials.
And now
I know, right?
And we're about to talk about another demographic, but I do want to remind you, we will be taking your questions in a little bit, so please post them in the comments section and we'll get to them shortly. Now, the other interesting statistic you raised was not about a new human demographic, but about machines. And there actually being more machines, and I guess if we think about the Internet of Things and more machines being connected, they will be shopping for us, and we're already seeing some examples.
Yeah, it's a very interesting idea we've been exploring at Gartner for several years now, which is what happens when a machine or an internet-connected machine actually takes on the behaviors of human customers. So we estimate that there are actually more machines on the planet that can act like customers than humans. And that sets up a whole nother set of dynamics, which is if you have delegated your grocery shopping to a bot and I want to sell you something, do I market to you or do I market to the bot?
Right.
And that it's really, really interesting stuff. But that's the world that we're headed into, and today it's 20% more. In the future, it could be 3 or 4 or 5 times more machines than people making those decisions.
Interesting. Something to think about for various roles within organizations.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
And so, Mbula, in your section, you were talking about security and risk and digital ethics.
Yep.
And the role that CIOs and IT leaders need to play in this digital society.
Yeah.
Can you share with us some of these real security concerns?
Yeah. You know, at the beginning of this conversation, Dawn explained that the premise of the keynote theme was that we're celebrating 50 years of, you know, when the first message went over the internet. And so when I was talking about digital society, it's really calling CIOs to action to really remember and be cognizant of the fact that the decisions they will be making today in terms of technology implementations are going to impact society, not just today, but, you know, for the next 5, 6, 7, 50 years, so to speak. And that's where, you know, digital society and ethics and security comes in, because if we think about the way CIOs or, you know, people in IT security have been thinking about security, it's more about let's invest to protect our infrastructure, right? But in the digital society, that goes beyond that, right? So how much we spend on security is not the key determinant of whether we're doing a good job in addressing some of those security issues, digital society issues, ethical issues. We really have to kind of unpack that black box that is developing with artificial intelligence. At the end of the day, it's human beings who are developing those systems, right? And so they need to be, to some extent, accountable to how you design those systems with some of those aspects of ethics. And it's not an easy thing to do, because when you think of the definition of ethics, this is what is right and wrong, right? What might be right for you might not be for myself, right? So that is the challenge that CIOs are going to be facing going forward. But it has to go beyond just spending. We have to really rethink this kind of issues. This goes beyond corporate social responsibility as well. We're actually designing the digital society.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a big call.
Which is a big
It's
call.
a big mandate for CIOs to say, you have this role, you have this opportunity to lead, and with that leadership comes this, almost this mandate.
Right, and we gave examples of how that can work, right? When we talk about, so it's not just security or, you know, the digital society, it's also, you know, that impact on society. When we make technology investments, let's look at that in the lens of the impact it will have in our society. And one of the examples that I gave in the keynote was the Dutch telecom company KPN, which was a really fantastic case study of a large organization that is putting societal issues and values at the forefront of their strategic planning, using technology to actually enable that and create that digital society that we all want for ourselves. So it is possible to, you know, strike that balance between investing, protecting the enterprise, and actually ensuring that we are securing our digital society as well.
Which is interesting. There, you know, when we think of digital society, and as far as we're going to have to even address these new complex issues and philosophies almost, it was interesting though that you brought up that we have these almost unrealistic expectations of security, and that we have this notion of banks being held up. That we kind of don't expect that anything will be unsecure in a digital environment.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you know, and the example I gave is, as human beings, we're kind of okay with the fact, not necessarily okay, but we kind of accept that, you know, the banks occasionally get robbed. You know, the guys come in masks and all that, and, you know, shooting everybody up. But the digital society is different, right? We have to ensure that even with all the digital systems that we're putting in, they are just as secure. But the interesting thing is the customers expect that to be an automatic thing, but it is not. It requires a lot of investments. It requires a lot of mindset shifts on how we approach this investment in securing our infrastructure. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what's interesting, part of this keynote is to help our CIO clients really recognize that they are more than just service providers. They're strategic partners. They can influence digital society. They can help their organizations focus on the customer. These are ways that we help nudge our clients into really realizing their potential.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you think about CIOs and IT leaders walking away from this keynote, what do you really want them to wrap their heads around? You've got this big concept of TechQuilibrium, that balance, the and the dilemmas. How would you suggest
I
they
can
think
answer it,
about
and Mbula should answer it too. I'd say this idea of the power of enabled by technology is something new for us. And that's embodied in the idea of TechQuilibrium, that you can be a digital company and a traditional company at the same time. And that extends to your customers, to the way you make decisions, to the way that you interact with your board members, et cetera. So that to me are the biggest takeaways.
Yeah. Another takeaway is also, I started my section with saying that, we're all living in a digital society, right? And technology is shaping everything we do. How we speak to each other, how we communicate. Right now, it's technology that's enabling this conversation. And so we have to put a lot of thought in how we manage that, right? And so the takeaway for CIOs here is, hey, you're not just a service provider sitting in the back seat. There are areas of competence, technology implementations and design is actually what is driving, digital business, is driving the digital society. So they should feel more empowered, that they can actually, take the front seat and lead these initiatives in their organizations. That is, for me, really a key message in this symposium.
Great. Okay, we are going to take some questions now. We have one from Hossein from Iran asked, would you mind explaining how Gartner plans to incorporate cognitive technologies? Sounds interesting.
Into our research,
actually, the question doesn't say, but that's actually making me think of the tool that you talked about during the keynote, which was interesting.
I think for our clients, we talk about how really artificial intelligence technologies are really permeating every type of cloud-based product today. So that's already making its way into it. I think also a lot of this is about experimentation. Many of these technologies cannot be opened up out of the box and be used. And what we really encourage our clients to think about is what business problem are you trying to solve? And then what are the couple different types of technologies you can apply and then experiment.
Right.
That's how we talk about it generally.
Right, absolutely. It's all about enablement, right? So right now we've been on the path of automating processes and obviously using certain technologies that have enabled that. But now we're looking at how can artificial intelligence actually enable even a better automation of some of that processes. Not necessarily, I know there's this concept that people will lose jobs and this kind of things, but what we want to do is ensure that we are driving that message out that it's not collaboration between artificial intelligence and the intelligent human beings that we have to actually create those powerful system processes, products that we're talking about.
Yes.
So
it's really
it's just the next level as well.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's that combination.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there really an ideal state of TechQuilibrium?
Is there an ideal state of TechQuilibrium? Well, I think the short answer is that TechQuilibrium point will change. It's never going to be fixed because you have an organization, let's go back to that oil pipeline company, they probably can't digitalize their value proposition so much, but they do have control over digitalizing their operations. So we think organizations can take that as far as they want to, but the market may determine how much of the value prop can be digital. And that's why it's not going to be a fixed point. And also, if there's a new disruptive technology or a digital giant wants to get into a space they haven't been in before, that will change the TechQuilibrium point as well.
Right, absolutely. And I think Val did give a couple of examples where you have very specific examples of digital giants that are moving away from digital and encroaching, the traditional market, which is kind of recalibrating where that TechQuilibrium is going to be. So case in point, it's not a fixed point, it's something that will be adjusting depending on how the markets behave, depending on adoption, depending on where the different organizations are investing in and moving to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. As an IT leader, I face so many demands from stakeholders throughout the organization, it seems hard to turn and dilemmas into opportunities. Is that really possible? Which is a fair question.
It is a fair question. When we were kind of architecting this keynote, we didn't want to give the impression that you have to do more as a CIO. We wanted to show that there are technologies that could turn those and dilemmas into and opportunities. So we're not saying you have to work harder. What we are saying is you have to use technology smarter to be able to do both two opposite things at the same time.
Right, right. And when you think about stakeholders, obviously as an IT leader, you're going to have multiple stakeholders. But I think the trick here is really to look across your stakeholders and determine who are the key stakeholders, right? And really assess the capabilities, the skills that you have, and align them to those visible, initiatives that will drive that starch of an IT leader forward. Yeah, so it's just a question of reassessing and rebalancing.
Yep. Okay, let's see, I think we have another one. Syed Rizvi asks, would you shed light on how Gartner plans to address governance security for the digital government?
Oh, wow. That's an ongoing topic, right? And if you look at how the different governments are approaching that, I mean, in Europe we've had the GDPR. In South Africa we had PEPTA. In US, obviously, DARPA and other organizations are leading some of those initiatives. So yes, organizations will have to rethink how they do that, but I think governments are really setting the guidelines and mandate and compliance issues that organizations will have to comply to. So for CIOs, IT leaders, security leaders, they're really called upon to toe the line with some of those regulations that is coming down the line from governments and regulatory agencies. So it's an interesting space to watch out, and it's developing.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Randy from San Francisco asks, how can CIOs change the culture? Now, we are interviewing Mary Masaglio on Wednesday. We'll be talking all about culture and digital transformation, but do either of you have some thoughts you'd like to share on that?
Yeah, last year we talked about, and I think Mary's going to talk about this idea of a culture hack, which is a small, visible way to communicate that things are changing. And when we introduced that idea last year at the keynote, it got a lot of positive response because culture is such a big thing.
It is.
And if breaking it down into smaller pieces, people feel like, hey, I could probably do that. So I'd wait for Mary on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things we also emphasize in Gartner research is also to recognize and celebrate the culture that you've had thus far. Because fact is, it's what that has made you successful until now. But it's probably not what's going to make you successful going forward. So part of it is really communication, as you said. It's not just communicate, we're going to change our culture and do X, Y, Z, but also recognizing the strength that we have in our current culture, but articulating what needs to change, to create a culture that will support, the new ways that we're working. So it's both ways. We don't want to give our associates, employees, colleagues the notion that the current culture we have just doesn't work. It has served us well thus far, but there are things that we can do to make sure that it's more stronger going forward.
Right. Okay, we have one final question that just came in that's so good we're going to make time to ask it. How is the future of work changing the role of CIO, and how is it changing the company culture? That's a big one, but it's a good one.
That's a big one, yeah. I mean, one of our colleagues, Helen Poitevin, she writes about this, and one of the biggest changes is what we talked about earlier, was this partnership between machines and humans in the workplace. Whether it's a factory floor or you're a customer service agent, we think that's one of the big things, one of the big shifts that are going to take place over the coming years. With that comes how do we teach people to partner with the machine versus feel threatened by it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So we are going to close with just a couple questions that we like to ask on a little more personal Gartner IT Symposium Expo nature. How many of you attended conferences around the globe for IT Symposium Expo?
This is my...
And if you don't remember, it's okay.
I actually counted. This is my 35th one.
Wow. Okay, we'll see if anyone can beat that this week. There might be a few.
Certainly not me. Probably 15, 16. I haven't been at Gartner as long as you have.
Yeah.
Predominantly here in Orlando and Barcelona, and back in the days when we used to do it in France as well. So yeah, about 15 under my belt. Not
Okay.
bad.
And if we could get our conferences team to start one in a new city, which city would be your vote?
Oh boy.
And you're allowed to be a reverend.
Oh wow.
I don't. Oh gosh, a new city.
To go to Symposium, you mean?
I'm going to say Paris.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to say.
Paris.
I'm going to say Paris.
I'm going to Goa next month. I've never been to Goa. I've never been to India, so I'm looking forward to that.
Okay,
So
so
I'm
we're
sorry. Was
already
that
in Goa,
So is that where you want it to be, or where you?
where you want it to be.
Yeah, where you want it to be.
Where you
Okay.
want to be? I'm happy to go to Goa.
Okay,
I got
so
the gig, so
that's
I'm happy
great.
with
So we
that.
already have one in the city where
Okay.
Mbula wants it. And finally, what's your one piece of advice for attendees to get the most out of Gartner IT Symposium Expo?
Wow, that's a tough one. Networking, engage with Gartner analysts, and keep the conversations going. We're going to be here for 4 days, but it doesn't have to end here. You have access to Gartner. Let's keep the conversations, and we're here to answer any questions that we might not do in these 4 days. But yeah, that's my key takeaway.
Comfortable shoes,
Okay.
and don't feel like you have to process everything you hear at once. Let it sink in, revisit it in a couple of weeks, and then do something with it.
That's terrific. Well, thank you very much.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
very
much for
much. We
having
really
us.
appreciate
Thank
you
you.
being
Thank you
here.
very
Thanks
much.
very
Thank
much.
you for
Thank
joining
you.
us. Stay tuned. We will be having live coverage all week. And make sure to visit Smarter with Gartner for live coverage there as well. Take care.